You're listening to the Night Demon Network. Go to nightdemon.net/subscriber to unlock more exclusive content.
Every weeknight, it's Buzz After Dark.
You like that?
With Eric Steele.
Hang out with me Monday through Friday from 7 to midnight for the Buzz After Dark. It's kind of like the Titanic, except instead of 3 hours to sink, it takes 5 hours.
Freaks come out at night, that's for sure. The Buzz After Dark. After Dark.
All night long.
Awesome tunes, clothing optional.
You enjoyed the ride.
Weeknight 7 to midnight on 102.9 The Buzz. Bill's Rock Station.
Hello and welcome to the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast. I'm your host Nesbit, and we got a bit of a different episode today. It's kind of a different episode, but I think you're going to like it. On September 22nd, 2013, Jarvis Leatherby conducted one of his first ever interviews for Night Demon on the Metal at Midnight radio show on a radio station called 107.9 The Hall. And this wasn't a regular radio station. It was actually an exclusive FM radio station broadcast to a youth prison in Southern California. So this interview has never been heard before by anyone outside of the prison walls, and it's now being released to the public here exclusively on the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast. This is episode 15, Metal at Midnight. So, a few things. The name of the youth prison has to remain anonymous for legal reasons and security reasons, so we're going to avoid calling it by name. And also, the correctional officer needs to remain anonymous. So we're going to call her Ellie for the sake of anonymity for this episode. So, first of all, how did Jarvis end up on a youth prison radio show?
Ellie contacted me, I believe, through email. I think through Bandcamp. She had bought the first Night Demon EP. And we started talking, and she mentioned that she was a corrections officer at a youth prison and that she was doing a radio show called Metal at Midnight on 107.9 The Hall.
My name is Ellie, and I'm a corrections officer at a SoCal youth prison. Metal at Midnight was really a podcast that I did for a radio station that aired at the youth prison. Essentially, it was a radio station that only in the confines of the prison could you hear it. So let's say you turned into 105.3 on your radio station. Inside of your cell, the radio station would pop up.
The way they do it is they have these frequency blockers apparently inside the prison. So any broadcast going out on that broadband cannot be picked up anywhere outside of the prison walls. So the inmates, I hate calling kids that, prisoners and inmates, but you know, they're allowed to listen to that in their cells.
Everything was pre-recorded, the songs, the segments. It was a program that taught the youth about broadcasting and allowed them to explore music. So I created this, let's say, podcast to really, tell a story, to essentially tell my story about my journey with music so the youth could listen and reflect on their own journey with music.
But it's good to have somebody like her there that is actually interested in reforming these kids and giving them some hope when they get out on the outside.
And working at the radio station, I realized those of us that love music, it all starts somewhere. And most of us can remember that moment. I have a pretty good memory. So I remember for me, it was a mixtape that a friend gave me that was Metallica Ride the Lightning and Slayer Seasons of the Abyss. And the first song I heard was Fight Fire with Fire. And I retold that moment and aired it every Friday night from midnight to 2 in the morning. I basically told stories. I went back in time. And funny, later I can remember telling Jarvis that, it's late at night, I'm thinking nobody's listening. And one day I walked into one of the units and one of the youth was behind their cell door and he saw me come in and he started banging on the window to get my attention. And then he yelled out, "Middle at midnight." And I remember just laughing and thinking it was so funny, that he was listening. He had heard the stories and he's like, "Hey, it's pretty cool. Like, I really like your stories and some of the music that you play." I think he was really into some punk stuff like GBH and he connected with it. And I really thought like, wow, they're actually like listening to what I have to say. So I went back in time, like I said, and my first concert was White Zombie in 1991. I told that story as if it was happening. The first vocalist that I really connected to was Phil Anselmo. And I talked about him and at the time, being 15, 16 years old, what that meant to me. I talked about hearing Cliff Burton play Anesthesia, and that made me want to actually pick up the bass.
So it's a pretty cool idea. Ellie uses her love of metal to reach out to the youth in the institution through the radio station. But how did Night Demon get involved?
The instructor I worked with at the radio station actually brought in the CD. He had been at a record store and heard it playing and asked the staff at the record store, "Hey, who's this band?" And they said, "Hey, it's this band Night Demon." I think at the time, I think the drummer was actually working at the record store and said, "Hey, yeah, we have a CD." He bought it. He brought it in and he's like, "Hey, I think you would really like this band." I think, he knew I liked heavy metal. I played it. And I think the first thing I thought when I first put it in is like, what year was this? What year did this band come out? Because it had that old sound to it, the guitars. And then, you hear Jarvis's voice. And there was something, so melodic about it. I think I liked that it was a 3-piece, that you could hear, the bass and the guitar together, the harmonies. I think it was something like old but new.
So she falls in love with Night Demon's music right away. And now keep in mind, this is 2013, and there's only the self-titled EP out at the time with 4 songs on it. Night Demon, The Chalice, Ancient Evil, and Ritual. So she has this metal-themed radio show, and she figures, why not try to get Night Demon on the air?
I guess I just gave it a shot. I knew they were a more local band, and I thought maybe they'd be interested in doing an interview. It's funny, I'm not this like super outgoing person. I'm pretty introverted, but I think that, nothing ever seems to really happen in life unless you give something a shot. And I think I just thought, hey, you know what? I'm going to send these guys an email, see what they say, what's the worst that could happen. I think originally when we did the interview, the first interview, Jarvis and Brent both came into my house. I have like a music room and, we just sat down and I think I had some questions written out, just talking about music and their influences and just what they really connected with. And it really just felt like just a normal conversation with, like I said, people I kind of knew and were very accessible. And it just kind of went from there. I mean, Jarvis and I became, I think friendly friends. He actually we talked a lot about, for me, my influences. And in my music room, I have all these framed posters and records. And I have a lot of Pantera memorabilia back from the 90s. And later, after we did the interview, he contacted me and was like, hey, I have something I think you would like. I think you'd like it more than I would. And I want you to have it. And I was like, okay. So I came down to the studio and, he pulled out this Pantera comic, which from the 90s, you got it if you were, I think, a member of the fan club. And he had been a member and he gave me his copy. And I'm like, are you sure you want to give me this? And he's like, yeah, like, I think you should have it. And that's something that, being a music fan, what things mean to people. And I was really kind of taken back, like, wow, really? That, and he had a signed copy of The Great Southern Trendkill and Dime had signed it. And he gave me that too. And some stickers. And I was just like, wow, like he didn't need to do that. We kind of just connected in that way. I think later I had given him a book that I'd read on Black Sabbath. It was one of those 33 and a third books about, I think, Masters of Reality, it might have been. But it wasn't just talking about the album and how it was made. It was actually from a kid's perspective, their first time hearing Black Sabbath and what it meant to them and how they just kind of became obsessed with the album. And I saw him at a show, or maybe we were hanging out, and I was like, hey, I want you to check out this book. I read it. It's pretty cool. I wrote something in it. I'm like, pass it along to somebody else who you think should read it. And so it's just kind of this natural friendship. So I was like, really like, hey, I want you to come in and see if I can get you to come in and talk to the kids. I'll pitch the idea of my work and see if they'll, kind of allow it. The clearance process, just basically, background, just make sure, you haven't been arrested, done anything super crazy.
I had to go through a lot of clearance to be able to get in there. Not just a background check, but what's also called a live scan. So they did do a full background check on me, and I had to go in for interview with the warden and whatever committee was there. And quite a few times had to go in, get fingerprinted and all kinds of stuff. But all in all, I did end up getting in there, and it was a really cool experience. So outside of the interview itself, I did end up being asked to go in and volunteer to talk to the kids and talk about music and stuff like that. And I ended up doing that, and that was actually really cool. It was pretty rewarding to do something like that.
He came in, talked to the kids, talked about music. I think it was really good for them to hear from someone doing it, what it took and the sacrifices that people make. And I think they thought it was pretty cool. Hey, here's this guy. He's in this band. He's coming in and he's talking to us. And, he didn't just, play metal. He knew a lot about a lot of music. So I think they thought, hey, this is pretty cool.
I will say one incident that I'm not very proud of now. There was a kid in there that ended up recognizing me. And the reason he recognized me was because prior to me going there and prior to him being locked up, Night Demon played a show at 118 West in Simi Valley. And it's a beautiful concert venue, but there wasn't many people at the show. I remember vividly smoking a joint outside, and two kids had walked up and they said they were fans of the band and they were at the show, and they were actually really, really cool kids. They were really nice kids, but I ended up smoking them out. So, I'm inside the prison walls and I see this kid and he looked familiar. I didn't really recognize him right off the bat. I just think I was caught off guard, but he started, mentioning, man, that was so cool when you smoked me out, man. And, I was trying not to draw any attention to that, but I was like, look, man, just stay cool. All right. Just stay cool. We're not going to talk about that here. So, I guess, I hope that I've grown up a bit since then. But it's one of those classic things, looking back, it's not my proudest moment, but it did happen, and that is the real world. I was not the one that made this kid end up in jail, but I definitely could have been a better influence. And I when I went in to talk to the kids, I definitely thought about that at the end of the day and have done my best to be a better influence for the youth. But I digress.
So coming up, the full Metal at Midnight interview from 2013 featuring Jarvis Leatherby.
What is up, Night Demon Heavy Metal podcast listeners? This is your resident motor mouth, Jarvis Leatherby, telling you about something very, very special here. The Decibel Hall of Fame Anthology Volume 3. This is a book, guys. That's right. We all know Decibel Magazine as the #1 metal magazine in North America for many years running. But you know what? They also have a fucking killer book series, okay? I want to tell you about this. The Decibel Hall of Fame Anthology Volume 3. This limited edition hardcover includes 25 Hall of Fame stories from Decibel's revered monthly series of artist interviews on the making of their classic extreme music albums. Featured in this book are stories behind classic albums such as Stained Class by Judas Priest, apocalyptic raids from our good buddy Tom Warrior's Hellhammer, Pleasure to Kill from Teutonic German terror creator, Court in the Act from the legendary new wave of British heavy metal gods Satan, and of course, Abigail from the legendary King Diamond. And last but not least, Night Demon's personal favorite, Heartwork, from the only other band from Liverpool, Carcass. So guys, please head on over right now to store.decibelmagazine.com and grab a copy to read the definite stories of heavy metal's definitive albums. Put in the promo code Night Demon upon checkout to receive 10% off. That's Night Demon, one word, all capital letters. Get your 10%, store.decibelmagazine.com. While you're there, guys, go ahead and grab a subscription of the Mag 2. They've got a great vinyl flexi series. Do yourselves a favor here. Get on the level. Store.decibelmagazine.com. Promo code Night Demon. See ya.
So here it is in its entirety. The Metal at Midnight interview for the first time released to the public. A few things I want to mention. This interview is from 2013, and a lot has changed in the 7 or so years. So I'm going to interject at a few points to clear some things up and drop in some obscure Night Demon trivia, just to help clear things up, because there's a couple of things in here that are a little confusing. So here from 2013 is Jarvis's interview on Metal at Midnight.
You're listening to Metal at Midnight. Today in the studio with a very special guest, bassist and frontman Jarvis Leatherby of Ventura's very own Night Demon. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
So how long has Night Demon been playing together, and how did that come about?
We started playing together, I think it was March 2011. It was me, our guitar player Brent, and our original drummer Pat Bailey, who played drums for the punk band Patient Zero. Pat used to be a roadie for this Black Sabbath tribute band that I used to bum around with called Warning. He really liked the new wave of British heavy metal sound, so did Brent. I was roadieing for the Wrath, the effing Wrath, that the other band that Brent and our current drummer John play in, and we had just been talking about this kind of music that we like new wave of British heavy metal style music, and the only other person me and Brent could think of was our buddy Pat, and he played drums. So Brent played guitar, and I played bass and sang, just so we can kind of get the basis of the band, because you can make any band work with a bass guitar and drums. I mean, we had never thought about going further than that, adding a second guitar player, because we just wanted to get off the ground, just play together and be able to get through a song, you know? So I would sing and play bass, and that's kind of how we ended up with that. And in the first, it's kind of a magical combination. We got together, we had 4 rehearsals, and the first 4, we wrote the first 4 songs, and then the 5th time we got together, we went and recorded that demo, which is now our debut EP. So since then, we took a break. Pat had left and went up to college for some weird reason. But he's up there, up in Arcata. And then, so we didn't play for about a year. And then John said, hey, that was a cool band. You should have kept it going. I'll fill in on drums. So that's kind of how it happened. And that was probably about a year and a half ago. So since then, we've just been playing shows regionally, put out this EP with various record labels, and been getting a lot of good press and good attention, and now we're getting booked to go on tours and play bigger stuff, and it's kind of all taken off from there. So just for fun, nothing serious, to something totally awesome.
Something's definitely getting underway and getting some play, and at least word of mouth, that's how I heard about it. So, but I think I read somewhere that Night Demon is your first band as vocalist. Is that true?
That is true.
The other night, I think I heard a little tinge of Glenn Danzig in there for a sec, where I was like, wow, this is pretty awesome.
I've been singing for a long time.
Yeah.
I've been singing. I've taken many showers in my day.
When did you start playing music, and who would you say are your main influence as a singer and as a bass player?
Okay. Well, funny you mentioned Danzig. Yeah, he's definitely one of my biggest influences. And that goes back to like Elvis and Jim Morrison, because that's basically Glenn Danzig. It's like Elvis and Jim Morrison mixed with Henry Rollins or something, you know, like Black Flag era Rollins. I started playing when I was 12. I started playing guitar. My dad had played guitar in a band called Black Opal with Michael Anthony from Van Halen. And they were like best friends. And then Mike went on. My dad stopped playing, and Mike went on to join Van Halen. And you know, they still talk and have a good relationship. So I kind of grew up around that stuff, you know. And so I wanted to see. My dad would just play guitar as a hobby, and I wanted to play. So he bought me a guitar at Henson's in Camarillo, a little Yamaha guitar and a small combo amp. And I started playing. I went to Henson's in Oxnard, took some lessons, and I learned Metallica Was One. Was the first song I learned, and I loved it that I could just play that to it. You know, it's so simple but such a great song. And I stopped playing for a couple years for some reason. I started playing sports and stuff, but I always listened to metal. I still did. And I went to a private school, Christian school, and I saw this. They showed us this video on all the evils of heavy metal, and it was this movie called Hell's Bells, and it was like 3 hours long. And the next day, all the kids, most of the kids in school that I had grown up with my whole life, it was the same 30 kids for 8 to 10 years, you know. They brought all their CDs in, and they were smashing them. We had a big smashing party, and me and two other guys, Mike Mall and Doug Clark, we were there. Doug Clark, rest in peace. You know, we said, hey, this is what's happening. Like this, we went the opposite. We got to do this. This is great. And that was the beginning of the end. So that was like 8th grade, you know, kind of got into doing that. So a lot of stories, but that's...
As far as bass players...
bass influences. You know, Cliff Burton for sure. Absolutely. Steve Harris from Iron Maiden. Geezer Butler from Black Sabbath. All those. But oddly enough, I'm not a finger player. And all those guys are finger players. You know, all of them. I can play with my fingers pretty well. Not fantastic. And it's not very comfortable for me. I've started out as a guitar player, so I'm always a pick player. But it took years of just practicing on my own and playing bass and really listening for bass and listening to bass in other bands to pick it out as what kind of instrument it really was, because it wasn't like guitar. And when I started playing it, I played it like a guitar, and it's not. It's much more about steadiness and your right hand attack versus your left hand technique. You can go anywhere, you can hit bad notes, it doesn't matter, because it'll just make the rest of the band sound like they're off, because you're the rock, you know?
Well, they say a rhythm will save a bad note.
Exactly, absolutely, absolutely.
I was given your EP about 3 months ago, and I have to say, completely addicting. I think at one point I had to like take it out of the car and give it to somebody so I wouldn't kill it. And what I mean kill it is like when you listen to something so much that you're like, I need to give it a break.
Yeah.
So the point is that it sounds great, and the songs are tight. Better than that, the true test for me was really seeing you guys live and seeing if you could carry that sound over from the studio. And you definitely could. To me, it sounded right on, your voice, everything. Sometimes you see people and you're like, they don't really sound the same, but I can say you guys definitely do. So what is your favorite song off the EP to play live?
Well, thank you for all that. I would have to say Ritual. And we usually open with that one. That song has a lot of cool elements in it, and like this kind of like speed metal breakdown, or pre-speed metal breakdown, I should say. It's funny because it's like we're a kind of throwback to like, 79 to 81, like British influenced metal. But at the same time, we all grew up on Metallica and everything, so we can't get away from knowing how to thrash.
Right.
We can't get away from it. We grew up on it. So there's going to be some of that in there. So that's why I think it's a great band, because it's like we take that classic era and add some of the other elements that came later. Not a whole lot, but it's definitely in the soul of it. Like we have the knowledge of what became later. We have the knowledge. It reflects in our music that we are from all different schools, and we are aware of any musical combination that could happen in heavy metal.
So what do you think is the crowd favorite when you play?
The Chalice, for sure. I mean, that's always the hit, and that was actually what we first called it. That was the first name of the band. We got before we even played one note ever as a band, ever, I booked us a show opening for Accept, and we were called the Chalice. And before that show had come about, before that show had actually happened, we had already changed the name from the Chalice to Ancient Evil to Night Demon. Basically, all the band names became song titles, and we had written all the songs, we had recorded the EP, and we had broken up all within the span of booking that first show and calling ourselves the Chalice. So a lot happens fast with this band. We like to work fast.
Yeah.
But that's definitely the crowd favorite, and we don't want to be known later on as it's the Chalice Band, But it's funny because on our next record we were going to have a song called The Chalice Part 2, but whatever, we're going to let it die with that.
To me, the EP sounds really versatile. Every song sounds a little different. I feel like I was able to hear the many sides of Night Demon. What can fans expect on the full-length album? And will you be touring after that for the album?
Yeah, well, definitely touring. Our plan is to tour as much as we can. We're going to Europe next year for sure for the Keep It True Metal Fest in Germany. Then we're going to tour all around the UK with Amulet and through the mainland of Europe, and then come back and do some East Coast stuff. We're trying to maybe plan something early in the winter time, or early 2014 to tour. Our record will probably not be released until sometime next year. That's just kind of how album cycles go, and you have to have publicists want to work a record for 90 days before it's released, and you have to have this whole business strategy around it. So even though it'll be recorded next week, it's going to be sitting for a while. But that's okay, because I'll be writing the next one. But, this album, 9 new songs, probably a song from the EP re-recorded. I don't see us putting more than one on there. We'll probably do some cover songs just to have, we'll just make a full session out of it. I think, we'll end up recording about 14 songs.
That actually leads me to my next question. If you were to do a cover of anybody, who would you want to cover? If you had the approval to cover.
Well, you can cover whatever you want. You don't need anybody's permission. If you're going to put it on a record, you have to pay what's called mechanical royalties to whoever owns the publishing of the song, which is a whole nother conversation. But we do Diamond Head, Lightning to the Nations. We do that song we really like. There's a band called Riot, an early 80s band. We do a song by them called Road Racing. We've done We Will Rock You, the Queen rock and roll version, not the, stomping, clapping one. Misfits, Green Hell we've done. But Metallica's done that, so we wouldn't record that. Radar Love, I would say. Golden Earring, Radar Love.
Nice.
We really like playing that song a lot and kind of put our own spin on it. So I think that, this is a band, also, I'll just say this because this is on an exclusive radio station, but we're working out Oingo Boingo, Dead Man's Party, actually, in our style. And we don't want to stick to covering bands that we're directly influenced by and sound like, because we have a hard time changing the style of the song, and I think it's important when bands cover a song to really make it their own.
Right.
And I think we're guilty of not doing that. So I'm the first to admit that. But sometimes you have to put yourself in the position as an artist, as a fan. What does a fan want to hear? If you're going to sound just like, if you're going to be a clone of somebody else, they might as well just go listen to the original thing.
But sometimes it's cool to hear somebody you wouldn't expect to play a song like Mike Patton covering Easy.
Exactly.
I don't think anybody expected that.
Right.
But that's such a great version. Some people like
It's
that
great,
version
and they
better
play.
than-
Faith No More still plays it. You know.
Right.
So,
yeah, I think that's one of their big.
Yeah.
Play Easy.
Right. Exactly.
You know? I just saw Black Sabbath a couple weeks ago at Irvine Meadows or Verizon Amphitheater, and I know Iron Maiden and Megadeth just played, and Slayer's playing in October.
I was at Maiden Megadeth. Yeah.
Awesome. What do you think it is that keeps metal alive? Well, after some 40-odd years or so.
It's the fans. It's the fans, and it's the generations of newer fans, you know? And there's so much music out there to discover right now. It's great, you know? Because you can always, like, the internet has made that possible. When I was growing up, I had to hang on to everything. Fanzines, newspaper articles, word of mouth on the street, speculation about people, you know? I mean, I was a huge Ozzy Osbourne fan, huge, you know? And it was all about the mystery behind him and the stuff that people said about him and the stuff he was doing, you know? I'm thinking, like, he's living in a dungeon and he's, like, reading, like, stuff from Aleister Crowley and he's, you know, performing satanic rituals and stuff. And then the Osbournes come out as a TV show, and it's like, oh, this is a joke. And it honestly changed my opinion about it 100%. 100%. It's very hard for me how commercialized that got. You know, it's very sad for me, because these were the things, this is the same thing that hair metal did to heavy metal in the 80s.
Right.
The 80s, the heavy metal broke in the 80s for one reason. Well, first of all, anytime that anything happens in life, it's because there's a law of accumulation. It's a bunch of little things that you do in your life that eventually you're like, oh, that's why things are the way they are, because you plant seeds and they grow into bigger things here and there. But Iron Maiden, in 1984, the World Slavery Tour at Long Beach Arena, they sold out 4 nights there with no MTV play and no radio airplay. Back then, it was unheard of for a band to do that. That's what really put heavy metal on the map. And after that happened, it got national media attention. Before that, it had never happened, ever. You know, I mean, like with Quiet Riot, maybe, you know, but they were covering a song and that they got big off, and it was the pop scene, you know. So I forgot the question. I'm going off. I
think I had a conversation with someone not too long ago how the mid to late 80s, after, you know, all these bands had great albums, you know, Van Halen, ZZ Top, whatever. There was a certain point when it did become so commercialized that it kind of killed it, because that's when ZZ Top started using synthesizers, and it just what happened to the music. It kind of, you know, the formula became, you know, you have a video. You know, MTV caused that. You have a video, you're going to release the video, you're going to do the album, you're going to go on tour, and the whole image kind of changed.
Yeah.
But I think we're back to, I know for me, listening to metal, how I discovered other bands was to read the CD booklet and see who they went on tour with.
Yeah.
See who they thanked and
yeah.
went on tour with.
Absolutely.
And then I was like, you know, I really like this band. They thanked Sepultura, so now I have to go check out. And that's how I found, because there really wasn't, maybe at the time, KNAC was playing a little bit of Metallica, but it was hard to find a radio station that was going to play the band, so you had to do your kind of your own research.
Right.
Too. But I think now, coming full circle, that I think with your band, it's happening where it is word of mouth, because I can't, you know, I'm not going to turn on 95.5.
No. Yeah.
But I'm going to hear about it from someone else, and I'm going to give it to somebody else to say, hey, this is good.
And it's cool to be underground. I mean, that's the true test of how you know you're doing something that's culturally significant. I mean, it really is, because it doesn't, nobody has to come out and do anything for you. Especially these days when it's more convenient to sit at home on the computer. You know, that's what people do.
Right.
But when people are coming out and when people are talking about it, like, you know, that's how you're only ever going to know how good your product is, you know? And, like, it has to be something that people they absolutely have to have. Or else it's not worth doing on that level. It's always worth expressing yourself creatively if you can.
Right.
And creation breeds creativity, basically. You have to start. You have to just do it, you know? Even if you don't feel creative, you got to do it. You got to just put pen to paper. You got to actually be in the act of doing something in order to amazing things will grow, you know? It's just, you always have to be moving forward. If you're gonna make a move, a lot of people like to stay comfortable in their zone, you know. But if you're not, you know, that's the death of dreams. You know, you have to be living outside of yourself a little bit. If you're not at least 3 nights a week, you know, if your heart's not beating, then you're not really living. You're living in the confines of what you have, you know. You have to expand yourself, and you have to be able to take a step forward with everything you do, especially in music like that, you know. And that's why nothing's going to stay the same. And like you said, like, genres change and people experiment and stuff, you know. So you just got to enjoy it while you have it. And right now is a good time because all of this stuff is good. It's coming back, and it's fresh for a lot of young people that have never heard it. So to be in a current band that's got the youthful energy of what these other older bands once had, like, I'll gladly carry that torch.
Hey guys, Jarvis jumping in here. I want to tell you about Shadow Kingdom Records. Shadow Kingdom was the first domestic label to release Night Demon on CD. They put out the EP in 2013, and they also released the vinyl version of Live Darkness. Listen, you guys need to get your ass to the Shadow Kingdom Records store, okay? Right now, they're offering 10% off for all Night Demon Heavy Metal podcast listeners. Just go to the website, put in the code NIGHTDEMON10. That's Night Demon 10, all capital letters, Night Demon 10. No spaces. Put that promo code in upon checkout to get 10% off. Right now, guys, they have the Bloodstar 7-inch, which has sold over 1,500 copies, and these guys cannot hold on to it. So this next pressing, you want to get that before it goes out, okay? Also, SKR Compilation Volume 1. Guys, this is free on Bandcamp. They're giving it away for free. So not only are you going to go to shadowkingdomrecords.com and put in the code, all capital letters, no spaces, Night Demon 10 upon checkout, you're also going to go to their Bandcamp site and get this compilation for free. You're going to hear tons of fantastic fucking heavy metal. If you love us, you're going to love this label. Check it out, shadowkingdomrecords.com. Put in the promo code NIGHTDEMON10 and receive 10% off of your entire order. Do it.
I mean, I still think about it all the time, and I had so much fun doing it. It's just being creative. I interviewed Jarvis and Brent, and they were both so accessible. And I think that's what I really connected to, because, you know, a lot of these bands that I've grown up listening to, you know, at the end of the day, they're just, you know, they're musicians, they play in bands, but they're just big, geeky fans like the rest of us. And in the Ventura area, you know, they were a lot of local bands, and, you know, you saw that at shows. They all backed one another, and Frost and Fire was all about that. And it was really great to be a part of that. You know, Jarvis got me in contact with John Locks, who at the time had recently left Warbringer, and we did an interview as well. And I mean, I've been listening to metal for 29 years, and it's really, to me, it's a community of people. And I was thinking in the 90s, like metal, for me, it had this like physicality, not just the moshing and the energy, but the involvement. I mean, you found bands because you looked at who bands thanked and the liners, who went on tour with who. You know, you picked up the LA Weekly or the OC Weekly or whatever city you lived in. You know, people made tapes for each other. So for me with, you know, COVID, that is what I really miss in going to shows. The music, but just being kind of part of something. And one of my coworkers, we always joked that, you know, metal kids never get locked up. And that's because, you know, we would say that, you know, because they have something to care about. Something that keeps you focused, that keeps you in touch and makes you feel like, you know, someone's out there listening to you and going through what you're going through. And to me, being young, that's what it was all about. I mean, it consumed so much of my life at the time. And I think that it's just important to give kids the opportunity to listen to music, to explore music. And I'm really glad I had the opportunity to do it.
So there you have it. That's the whole interview. I can't imagine if they had gone with The Chalice for a band name. I can't imagine what that would be like. There's a couple of things I wanted to mention from this interview. At one point, Jarvis mentions that on their next record, they're going to have a song called The Chalice Part 2. Well, that song actually became The Howling Man. So The Howling Man, working title, originally The Chalice Part 2. It was going to be a sequel to The Chalice. So that's a little Night Demon trivia. He also mentions a tour with Amulet. That tour never actually happened, but they did tour mainland Europe, and they basically booked any bar or club that would have them on days off between festivals. There's another interesting part halfway through that interview where Jarvis talks about recording Curse of the Damned, and he says that they're recording 9 new songs. So that's actually true. There were only 9 songs at first. The guys actually spent a few months in the studio with Armand at the helm recording these tracks. The album was originally called Run for Your Life, and they recorded everything to a click track. And they put layers upon layers of tracks on it. And it sounds huge, but kind of stale because, you know, they recorded it to a click track. In 2014... to those 9 songs, they added Screams in the Night and Mastermind. And they went to Roger Camaro to re-record the entire album in a live setting. So that's what you hear as the Curse of the Damned album that you all know and love. So they recorded the album once. They weren't happy with it. They didn't like the sound of it. It didn't have didn't have the feel that they want. And then they went in and they completely re-recorded it live in the studio to kind of capture that live vibe and that energy. So they still have the unreleased Run For Your Life album. It sounds very different. And here's something to look forward to. It will be unearthed one day in the future on a deluxe edition of Curse of the Damned. So a deluxe edition of that album coming out sometime in the future. All of those tracks previously unreleased, with the exception of the Chalice 15, which some of you might have heard as a B-side. That was from those original sessions with Armand. There's another part in that interview where Jarvis says that he booked a show opening for Accept. They didn't actually end up playing that show because the drummer didn't want to do it. So actually, Jarvis booked New Liberty to open the show. So that's New Liberty, the band that Dusty and Armand were in at the time. And that's a kind of funny story. Here's Dusty to tell it.
We have a good friend. His name is Alan Pena. He was the booking agent at the Majestic Ventura Theater. And Accept was coming through on the Blood of the Nations tour. And he let me know about it. And I was completely stoked that the band was coming through because I'm sure many people know I'm a huge Accept fan. I have Metal Heart tattooed on me, and I grew up listening to Balls to the Wall and Metal Heart religiously as a kid. So needless to say, I was ecstatic they were coming through town. So Alan ends up asking Night Demon to open the show, and Night Demon was fairly a new band at the time. That was 2011 was when Night Demon was created, and the 4-song EP was made and all that. So Night Demon was super fresh and underground, and nobody knew about him yet. And the original lineup was intact at that time with Pat Bailey and Brent Woodward and Jarvis. And I believe it was Pat who said he really didn't want to play a live show. I don't know if he didn't feel prepared or for whatever reason I don't believe he wanted to play the show. I think Brent and Jarvis wanted to. They had enough material, excuse me, to make the show work. But in the end, Night Demon couldn't do the show, so they declined. Jarvis then came to Armand and I's old band, New Liberty. We were kind of like a sleaze rock, Guns N' Roses / Thin Lizzy-ish type band. So it wasn't as much of a fit as if it would have been Night Demon opening the show, but we were excited to be asked to play the show. So we get there that day and everything's cool, except as sound checking. I'm ecstatic. And it just so happened that my dad was in town. His birthday's May 5th. And he came out to spend some time with me. At that point, I hadn't seen him in almost a year. I moved to California in June of 2010, and this is May of 2011, so it was almost a year that I had been in California. My dad came out to visit, so he got to see my band at the time open for Accept, so he knew how much of a big deal it was for me. And everything's fine. The sound check goes, and Accept, does their thing. And they had a pay-to-play band that opened, and then I forget what name of the band it was. And we were asked to sell tickets for the show, and we didn't sell any tickets because we knew everybody there, and we just didn't really care to sell tickets. We weren't that kind of band that really pushed it all the time. So we didn't really get a chance to sell any tickets, and nobody was there at the show. I think out of the 1,240 people roughly that the theater fits, I think there was 100 people at that show. When Accept was doing the Blood of the Nations tour, not many people knew about the band at that time. I don't think they even really cared, honestly. It was all coming back around again, and metal was right about to pop through and become a lot more popular. So it was really an interesting time. The lineup for Accept was Wolf Hoffman, Mark Tornillo, T.T. Quick's old singer. It was his debut. Peter Baltus on bass, Herman Frank on rhythm guitar, and Stefan Schwartzman on drums. Good, solid lineup. The band was excellent. and it was great to see them. Funny story about the opening band. They were just clowns, and I don't even think they even sold that many tickets. I'd say they might have sold 20 tickets, and they went on and went over their time and ended up getting basically pulled when they were like playing their last song. Security from the theater started pulling pieces of gear off the stage while the band was still playing. They killed all of the amps and all of the PA from front of house, and the drummer was still playing, and security started taking pieces of his drum kit off the stage. And the band like freaked out and caused a scene, and Accept ended up shutting down all access to bands backstage. So here I am. It's a dream gig for me, opening for Accept, and I don't even get to go backstage and see the band and possibly meet them or whatever. So it blew all opportunity of being backstage, which really stunk, but it was hilarious to see the first band's gear being taken off side stage left, just piece by piece, and this guy playing his drum set as it's being whittled down to nothing. So funny. And that is probably the only thing I can really remember vividly is that. And my dad was really impressed with Peter Baltus's bass solo. He was like, that guy's an incredible bass player. And Peter was solid as hell. So it was great. And I had Blood of the Nations at the time, so I was listening to that record a lot. They opened with Teutonic Terror, which I think is a great song off that album. And it was just a memorable night all around and funny. And who would have thought that Armand and I would be in Night Demon and then be able to go out on tour with Accept one day. Just really made it something special.
So that was Dusty talking about his old band, New Liberty, that him and Armand were in before Night Demon. New Liberty, they're very different from Night Demon, but if you're into kind of that Sunset Strip metal kind of sound, I got the CD, The Uninvited. I listened to the shit out of it. It's awesome. So that's just a little taste of Armand and Dusty's band that they were in together before Night Demon. It's on Spotify and all the streaming services if you want to check it out. New Liberty. So that's it for this episode of the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast. Be sure to check out the subscriber section at nightdemon.net. We have archived full episodes of Metal at Midnight. I listened to them all. They're very cool. There's a very cool episode there about the first time she heard Cliff Burton playing Anesthesia. It's pretty cool. Definitely worth checking out. So that's it for this episode. This is Nesbitt signing off.
I'm the devil wearing white. Come with me, take my hand. I'll lead you to the promised land. Drink from the chalice, the unholy grail. Drink from the chalice, I'll give you everlasting life.
Thanks for listening to the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast. Head over to nightdemon.net, click on the subscriber tab, and sign up to access exclusive weekly bonus content. If you would like to donate to support the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast, you can do so through PayPal at paypal.me/nightdemonmetal. Additionally, if you have not already done so, please subscribe, like, rate, and review the show on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts.
unbearable suspense that keeps you on the edge of an abyss of terror.
Take a cult film odyssey into Cinemadness with Cinematic Void. Based in Los Angeles, Cinematic Void is a film series that specializes in horror and exploitation films. Currently, we are hosting Cinematic Void Up All Night in the Cinemadness movie, a monthly virtual screening series, as well as the Cinematic Void podcast, where we dive deeper into the world of cult cinema. You can find Cinematic Void on the World Wide Web at cinematicvoid.com, as well as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you like what we do, you can support Cinematic Void by joining our Patreon. Until next time, see you in the void.